My girlfriend, who is 20 years younger, is pregnant. Our children have grown up, so please grant me a divorce.
While enduring a profound sense of disgust welling up from the depths of my heart as I watched my husband apologize to me, I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. Here are the documents you requested. I'll take everyone, but the eldest son. Upon hearing my words, my husband seemed genuinely surprised, but I ignored him and left the scene. I'm Dolly, a 56-year-old housewife. I married Greg, an office worker, 35 years ago, and we had 2 children together. And now that our children have successfully found employment, I finally had a moment to breathe. Our eldest daughter, Natalie, is 28 years old. Our eldest son, Noel, took a 2-year leave of absence for studying abroad, but graduated from university at the age of 24 and secured a job this year. Since Greg's company had set the retirement age at 65, Greg, who was 58, intended to continue working for the remaining 7 years and even planned to work for a subsidiary company after retirement. Thanks to my affluent family background and the investments I have been doing since a young age, I had a decent income. Regarding Greg, even if you don't work so much, we have enough savings to live comfortably in our retirement years. That's what I explained, but
I'm not comfortable living on your income, so I'll keep working while I can.
And he stubbornly chose to continue working. Greg has a sister-in-law who is 48 years old and 10 years younger than him. Greg has significant affection for his much younger sister-in-law. Unfortunately, there was no conflict between me and my sister-in-law, and when we met, we would engage in casual small talk. We had a normal relationship where we maintained a slight distance between us. However, that sister-in-law did something outrageous. 3 years ago, on a certain day, despite being married, she had a relationship with a man other than her husband, and, to make matters worse, she disappeared. Furthermore, my sister-in-law had a 21-year-old son named Joe, but her husband refused to take custody. Considering that Joe was already 21 years old, it was somewhat harsh, but not an incorrect argument to say that he could live on his own. In response to this, both our parents-in-law and Greg were furious. And as a result, for some reason, Greg decided to take Joe into our home without consulting me at all.
Joe is coming to the house tomorrow.
Joe, your sister's son?
Yeah, she had a relationship with a man and disappeared. And to make matters worse, her husband refuses to take custody of Joe, so I decided to take him into our home.
Hold on. What do you mean? Are you saying he's going to live in this house? Why didn't you consult me about anything?
Shut up. Joe is 21 years old. He's not a helpless child, so it's fine since he can take care of himself.
That's not good. Besides, there's no room for Joe to live in.
There should be the room that Natalie used, right? She got married and moved out, so we can use her room. Anyway, it's already decided.
Greg abruptly ended the conversation with those words. Hearing his remarks, I had no choice but to sympathize with Joe's situation and reluctantly agreed to take him in at our house. However, contrary to Greg's words, Joe turned out to be quite a troublesome child, causing problems at university almost every day. This led to me visiting the school regularly and apologizing on his behalf. But that was just the beginning. Joe started causing problems outside of school as well, and I found myself being called by the police, having to go to the police station and bring Joe back home. Dealing with these issues always fell on my shoulders, as Greg conveniently avoided visiting the school or the police, using work as an excuse. I had discussed this matter with Greg multiple times, seeking his advice and support. Joe injured another classmate again. You don't listen to what I say, so at least say something from your end.
He's still a student, so it can't be helped. Both of our children are not students anymore, so pour your motherly love onto him.
I am not his mother, and if we neglect him, it might have a negative impact on Natalie and Noel's lives.
Negative impact? What are you talking about? It's like you're calling Joe a troublemaker.
I never said that. Every conversation with Greg went like this, with no productive outcome, and I found myself frustrated every day. However, despite that, I tried to take in Greg's words and address the issues with Joe. Please stop causing trouble. If you have any worries, I want you to talk about them. I approached him saying this.
What's up, lady? There's nothing I need to talk to you about, so don't try to act like a mother figure, okay? Seriously, it's useless.
Joe mocked my words, threw me a contemptuous glance, and responded like so. To be honest, the words pissed me off quite a bit, but I managed to suppress my anger out of pity for the poor child whose mother had left him. However, Joe's insolence was gradually directed at me in the home. As I tried to deepen our connection by approaching him gently, he began to look down on me. Eventually, he even resorted to raising his hand and intimidating me. When Joe was in a bad mood, he not only used abusive language, but also became physically aggressive towards me. Of course, I shared this with Greg, but...
It's just something kids do, so let it go.
He passed it off. Kids? Didn't you say he can take care of himself? Despite that, every time there's a problem, I have to go and pick him up. And in the end, I'm the one who gets physically attacked by Joe.
Mom, what do you mean?
Noel, who seemed to have overheard my desperate plea to Greg as he returned from work, interjected into the conversation. I hesitated whether to speak, but since Greg wasn't helping, I felt I had no choice but to rely on Noel. So I recounted everything that had happened up to that point. The truth is, Noel is highly skilled in judo and has a large and strong physique, capable of easily subduing Joe, even if he becomes violent. After hearing my story, Noel spoke up.
Why does Mom have to take care of someone like him? Dad brought him here without consulting anyone, so Dad should handle it. Anyway, if Joe lays a hand on Mom again, he'll face the consequences.
Noel glared at Greg.
What's with that attitude towards your father?
Greg was furious with Noel, but Noel continued.
You never consult the family on important matters, yet you conveniently act like a father figure only in situations like this.
Noel blurted out those words. Sensing the situation becoming explosive, I decided to forcefully end the conversation. I honestly can't bear it anymore, so do something about it. I told Greg. The following day, I brought Joe home after another fight at school. Don't cause any more trouble. If you cause problems, leave. I told Joe this, but he replied,
You were acting like a mother figure until recently, and now you want me to leave? Are you really an adult? You're such an irresponsible woman, he replied. I tried to retort to his words, but before I could speak, Joe hurled a plate from the dining table towards me. Don't bother me,
he shouted angrily. In that instant, Joe's body was lifted off the ground and slammed onto the floor.
Irresponsible is a woman like your mother who leaves her kids and disappears with a man. And someone like my dad who is stupid enough to take in a problem child like you without permission and leave him there.
Then Noel, who for some reason was at home, straddled Joe. Suddenly struck by a strong force, Joe seemed overwhelmed by the Noel in front of him and screamed inarticulately.
You thought Mom was weak, so you attacked her, right? You don't dare mess with someone like me, but you act all tough with people weaker than you. Don't you ever disrespect Mom again.
Joe could only nod in tears at Noel's vehement rebuke. It seems that based on the conversation from the previous day, Noel had intended to have a serious discussion with Joe and come to an understanding, persuading him not to cause harm to me. And when he came home, he heard Joe and I arguing at the front door. After observing the situation quietly for a while and confirming a crucial moment, Noel managed to subdue Joe. From then on, Joe never physically assaulted me. However, he continued to verbally attack me behind Noel's back, making hurtful remarks in secret. and I reached the limit of my patience. Until then, I had been trying my best to make my relationship with Joe somewhat better. I made an effort to find out Joe's favorite food from my mother-in-law and served it during dinner. I also put in extra effort to engage in conversations with him, hoping to improve our connection. However, Joe and his friends engaged in shoplifting at a store on their way back from school, and he was caught and disciplined once again. On the way back from picking him up from the police station, "I've reached my limit. When we get home, we will have a serious discussion," I announced, and mentioned that I would also have a conversation with Greg and Noel. And during dinner, "If Joe's attitude doesn't improve any further, I will leave, and from now on, I will cease all efforts towards Joe. I don't even want to call him by his name, so I'll refer to him as your sister's eldest son," I told him. Greg, as usual, confronted me in response to my words.
"You're practically Joe's mother. How can you say something so cold-hearted?"
He blamed me. "I have never been the mother of the eldest son, nor have I ever had the desire to be a mother. I don't have any warmth for a complete stranger who engages in criminal behavior." I spat out my words. Then it seemed Greg finally realized the seriousness of the situation, and as a compromise, he promised that if Joe caused another problem, he would enroll him in a boarding school. Although I didn't have much faith in it, it was the first time Greg proposed a compromise, so I decided to accept it, while also observing the situation. However, despite Joe's problem behavior decreasing, it never completely disappeared. And Greg, using the excuse of being busy with work, never fulfilled his promise. Noel finally started pushing for a divorce between Greg and me, and I began seriously considering it and making preparations. During this time, Greg started spending more time away from home, using work as an excuse, going on frequent overnight stays, and eventually even not coming back for days. Then one day, Greg came home unusually before dinner.
"My girlfriend, who is 20 years younger, is pregnant. The children are already adults, so please agree to the divorce."
He apologized to me. With a sense of disgust towards this insincere apology, I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. "Here are the documents you wanted. I will take everyone except the eldest son," I replied.
"Huh? Take Joe with you too?"
"No, that's impossible. After all, that child is a complete stranger to me. Moreover, he only causes problems and brings trouble. Why should I take him with me?" My words provoked a stronger reaction from Joe than from Greg.
"You're still irresponsible. So after acting like a mother all this time, when I became a nuisance, you just want to abandon me. Is that it?"
"When did you become a nuisance? You've been nothing but a nuisance from the beginning to the end." As Joe, on the verge of tears, looked at me with disbelief, I spoke to him while laughing, devoid of any sympathy. Noel, who had been silently observing the entire situation, finally spoke up.
"After all the things you, Dad, and Joe have done to Mom that require much more than just apologizing, you have the audacity to rely on her now." Saying that, Noel took the packed belongings and went with me to my parents' house. And I had already arranged for a lawyer to handle the divorce proceedings in compensation from Greg and his affair partner. I also contacted my in-laws to inform them of my sister-in-law's whereabouts, which I had found out through a private investigator. And then regarding my sister-in-law, "I will claim child support for Joe," I declared. I had a sense of unease when Greg started spending more time away from home, so I immediately hired a private investigator and also located my sister-in-law's whereabouts. Greg, for some reason, refused to proceed with the divorce. "There's no way I can afford any alimony,"
he complained to his lawyer. And it's not surprising. Greg was spending money on his affair partner, and without my income, it would have been difficult to sustain their lifestyle. The lawyer,
"You were the one who brought up the divorce, correct?"
the lawyer said to Greg.
"I never thought she would actually go through with a divorce. And to demand alimony? I thought Dolly would be loving and provide child support for my child with my affair partner.
I was taken aback by the outrageous things he was saying, and even lawyers who specialize in divorce were baffled. They had never seen anyone come up with something like that, and they didn't understand the argument at all. In any case, I had entrusted the divorce with Greg to the lawyer, but this time it seems that Joe contacted the lawyer asking to connect with me. Of course, I refused this request and asked Joe about the reason for his actions.
Dolly was the only one who showed me motherly love,
Joe apparently said. It seems that my in-laws sent Joe to my sister-in-law's place, but she had already started a new family and treated Joe coldly. Her common-law husband even resorted to physical punishment. It's just karma coming back to you for everything you've done to others, right? You brought this upon yourself. I would actually want to demand compensation for the trouble caused, but if you never get involved with me again, I'll let it go. I asked for a message only, refusing any further communication. And at the same time, I informed my sister-in-law's actual husband of her whereabouts, resulting in her being held accountable for the affair. In the end, Joe had no choice but to go to Greg's place. But the woman who was Greg's affair partner refused to take in Joe. Greg tried to manipulate the situation just like he did with me, but it seems that the affair partner managed to escape. However, Greg was properly held responsible for child support, not only for the compensation to me, but also for the future child's upbringing. He fell into such financial distress that he couldn't afford to support himself, let alone take care of Joe. But Joe had no one else to rely on, so he waited for Greg outside his workplace and pleaded with him on the spot. Of course, other employees witnessed it, and it became a hot topic in the company. Despite nearing retirement age, Greg chose to resign voluntarily. I moved to my parents' house with Noel, and that's where Greg came to me in tears to tell me about the events that unfolded after our divorce.
If you find my sister, I can let go of Joe. Let's live as a family without interference. You two are all I have.
But when Noel heard this, he responded,
Just the fact that a man like you claims to be my father is a stain on my life. It's absolutely impossible for us to live together, and I never want to see your face again.
He firmly rejected. Greg looked at me, seeking help, but I said, I've asked you so many times, over and over again, about Joe, and you've ignored it all. I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say, I said, and closed the front door. Greg continued to cause a disturbance outside for a while, so I called the police to have him taken away. Then I immediately contacted a lawyer and obtained a restraining order. After that, it seems Greg tried to contact and visit our eldest daughter, Natalie, but her husband warned him to stay away. Natalie's husband was a police officer, so Greg, fearing another involvement with the police, apparently disappeared completely. And then Noel introduced me to his girlfriend, whom he is considering marrying. I will be fine on my own. Live with your future wife. Upon hearing this, Noel began cohabiting with his girlfriend, and I started living alone. Although I occasionally feel a sense of loneliness in my newfound life alone, I am enjoying a leisurely and fulfilling life of freedom. The alimony from Greg was originally planned to be paid in installments, but it quickly fell behind. When I informed my parents-in-law that I was considering legal action, they offered to advance the full payment on my behalf. It was quite distressing to me that I seemed to be depriving my parents-in-law of their retirement funds.
In the first place, if Grandpa and Grandma didn't neglect Mom and push Joe onto her, Mom wouldn't have suffered at all, so there's no reason for Mom to worry about anything.
When Noel said that to me, I felt somewhat relieved. From now on, while living my life for myself, I want to provide as much assistance as possible to Natalie and Noel, and support the happiness of my children.